Okay, so what I'm gonna do is this. I'm just gonna give you a PM speech. I think you can use that to determine the rest of it. That will help with like engagement for the rest of the round. Uh, okay. What? Yeah, oh, so because I'm going to leave the call and sing somewhere else, unless you guys are gonna call me back. And okay, that's fair enough. Let me just. That's okay. Let me see. I'm going to start my speech in a 3, 2, 1, go. Panel, I think there is something that we need to discuss. So I think there is something that needs to be clear. There is a concept of a narrative existence and the overwhelming narrative. So that means that there is more than a lot of information in influx. That means the information is beyond just uh, information on a basic plane. But I think there is like mainly a lot of fake news as well. So that means that there's a lot of information that goes around that is not just unsanctioned, that is most likely untrue, and based on also reflections in of itself. That means that in most cases, movies overwhelmingly put this narrative and it has been existent for so long. It means then that there is not a proportionate balance between the narratives that should be existence or the narratives that should be probably provided for, which means then that the concept that we're regulating is not necessarily the concept of good triumphing over evil in children's entertainment, but the concept between the concept of having good overwhelming narrative. We say that this is something that is very important. Children's entertainment is one that is important and partial for children's growth, children's intellectual growth, and children's progressive growth. That means the information they take in and take out is crucial for them to have intellectual growth and intellectual capacity building in that regard. That said, I think then that in respect and that the discussion is going to be simply on why we regret something if it probably doesn't help pass the younger generation and whatnot. But you get most of my metrics tied back to as I analyze things. So the first thing here I think is one is that I think that we're not necessarily debating, like I said, the concept, but I think the overwhelming narrative in of itself. So I think the debate could become very shallow if you're going to determine the truism and the falsity of that narrative. It's basically more better that we discuss the effect of that narrative on society, right? So I think then that the discussion boils down to a couple of things. It means then that the narrative of like good triumphing over evil in children's entertainment looks like a couple of things. It means then that movies in of itself shows that the good person wins every time and the bad person never loses. It means looks like Marvel movies where the Avengers are always on the right side of the story, and for example, like Thanos never it's supposed to be completely at the wrong side of the story, and everything that Thanos does is bad. And even when he does something, Avengers will always find a way to win. And I think that's I think that's like the basic line between that particular narrative. I think we regret that because I think because of that overwhelming narrative, it does one thing, it creates the assumption that everybody's alternatively supposed to be good and it creates a standard for individuals. Why is that bad? I think that even if Pop was to say that this is like a societal standard and movies are created based on societal standards, I still can't fly because at the end of the day, society is always changed and progresses over time. So unless Pop's argument is that at the end of the day, society is going to progress, is going to remain stagnant, or even if it was to progress, it's going to progress in like the world of very many few like individuals who probably have a lot of monopoly or control over what people consume and what they do not. That's also bad because that this is defeating for their case because it means you take away people's agency and people's ability to be able to like do conflict resolution and taking issues in that particular regard. It means you never create solvency for most of the problems. It means then you never create a world where individuals can be able to most likely self-actualize in that particular regard. Is there a P1? Three, two, one, none. It means then that at the end of the day, students and children in of themselves become a focal tool that is not only probably an exercising of their own agency, but they become an extension of other people's ideals. So they become an ideal of what the music industry wants them to pursue. We say it's bad for one person to probably create a narrative around what each and every single person would become. That means that every person creates a standard for what it's not. Everybody else who's different becomes bad and like discriminated by children, because apparently the portrayal of everything that the music industry portrays that is good. If you're not that, then you are evil. It means that then you're apparently a bad person, and that means that music industries can always draw the picture of who they want to have and what they don't want to have. We say the counterfactor is very simple: create a balance where people are most likely going to be able to have a good influx of ideas. You can have the narrative, you can make these narratives wear up every once in a while, but don't overwhelm one narrative to the extent that people forget what the other narrative probably wants to look like. Then it also means that you like don't objectively look at things. And I think that's bad because you never alternatively solve the problem. That means things like alternative disputes are things that you never allow people's information to reach there, because your view of that information is that these individuals are evil on the core, and even if they existed, that's not going to solve the problem. That's bad too, because you then don't help society to be able to be more progressive in nature. It means you don't have leeway for acceptance of different ideas and different ideologies. That things like LGBTQ ideologies that behind me. That means if you're doing sitting on the UN Council, things like you cannot have a views between Cold War and Pan Africanism, because those are two conflicting things that you cannot have, because at the end of the day, individuals are properly different, and you being on one side of history makes you a very bad person. It then creates a very bad ideal. So we said that in of itself, it becomes important that people in of itself need to live in a world where they don't have it. So true, we regret it because it takes away people's agency and handicaps how people think and function in a normal working economy. I think the challenge and the burden push to hope is to be able to give a comprehensive account of why it's important for people to still not own ideals close to their own and have a world of their own where they're most likely going to self-actualize. Sure.
Am I audible? All right, I'll begin my speech in three, two, one. Well, Banu, this house regrets the overwhelming narrative of good triumphing in children's entertainment, right? And team proposition literally tells us that they regret. Well, what are they regretting? They tell us that they're regretting the overwhelming, well, with emphasis the overwhelming narrative of good triumphing evil. But why do we think they shouldn't actually regret it? They first of all come and talk about the fact that they might dictate how someone thinks, and then they also talk about how it handicaps how people think, right? But basically what we're looking at here is, well, in children's entertainment, right? So why wouldn't we actually regret the overwhelming narrative in children's movies? Well, when we look at the point that these are children that we're talking about, right, with growing minds. So there is a need of the overwhelming narrative of good triumphing evil. Why? Because children basically grow up believing in what they watch when they're young, right? So if a child grows up with the mentality that they're watching the fact that, the bad guy will always be defeated, well, they will always grow up with that idea as well. Bad things are always defeated. So this is why we find that, there is a need to emphasize the there's the need of the emphasis there, right? So, kind of shall take majorly take a look at, when we look at these Pixar movies and these Disney movies, right? They always have the bad guy, losing out, and the good triumphing over evil. I mean, you take a look at something like Cinderella. Yeah, I'll take the path of majorly Disney movies, or even we can look at the children's movies like Problem Child, Dennis the Menace. Well, these are all children's movies where we look at the evil being defeated. Now, let me take a look at the famous Cinderella. We look at the point that in Cinderella, we obviously have the bad guys as like her stepmom, and then we have the good guys as like Cinderella and the prince and everything like that, right? And we look at the point that actually we look at Cinderella eventually triumphing over her stepmom. And what do we look at all this? At the end of the day, we realize that these movies actually reinforce positive values and provide a hopeful narrative to children and promote moral lessons, right? So what moral lessons do we even look at this at this point? We look at the point that with children's movies, when they are ending, there is always, forgiveness at the end of it, right? So we take a look at the fact that, okay, if we're having this overwhelming narrative in the children's movies, children grow up with the kind of virtues that we will expect them to what? To emulate. I mean, in these movies of good triumphing over evil, the bad guy is either arrested and the good guys are always forgiving the bad guys, right? I mean, this is what most children's movies do. We look at Problem Child, the bad guy is arrested, Water Killer is arrested, and then it eventually becomes the good kid. We look at Cinderella, her stepmom actually turns out to be what? She's actually forgiven and she becomes the good woman. Something to Snow White. This is the same story that, goes on with every children's movies. The children therefore are able to, adopt moral lessons at the end of the day. Once my child watches that, well, what are they gonna think? Well, they've watched this and they're like, oh mommy, the bad guy was defeated, right? Number one, the kid will know that it's not good to be really bad because once you're bad, you're gonna be defeated. Two, once you're bad, you're going to be arrested, you're going to be punished. And three, the kids are going to learn that forgiveness is key because this is what the children's movies what emphasize. This is why we have the good. This is why we always have the good triumphing over evil. So we totally believe that the status quo is very fine. So unless team proposition actually picks out a major loophole in the status quo that what we do not really want the overwhelming narrative because we actually look at the fact that children actually grow up in a better way. We get our kids having a better mentality. There is a good sense of justice that these movies are going to preach the children in the long run. Because once the children realize all this, there is a sense of justice, right? They realize that there is justice that, okay, once you do this, you're going to be punished in this way, or you'll be rewarded in this way and this way. So there's that sense of justice that the kids are able to adopt. Well, that is the point about why we need to really emphasize the good over evil in children's movies. So that is why we have the overwhelming narrative that what, this is it. This is what we want the children to emulate because there is a lot for the kids to run. Do I have any POI? Any POI? 3, 2, 1.
Yes, I
Okay,
have a
I'll.
POI. Don't you think there
Okay.
are other ways that children can be disincentivized from being bad in society?
Well, as I said, right, I believe there are other ways, but as I said, whatever the kids consuming and whatever the kids pick from TV is what mostly stays in the children's head. So much as the other ways, what the kids are picking from the TV and what they're watching is the major standpoint because what we see is what gets stuck in our heads, right? So I can tell a kid to do this, but they're not basically gonna do it. But if they watch it from the TV and they're like, oh yeah, okay, Cinderella forgave her stepmom, they're gonna learn to forgive because they believe. Most times what we forget is this children emulate from the screens, right? Children pick their role models from whatever they're watching there. So that is why the emphasis of this narrative of good triumphing over evil in children's entertainment is very important because we realize that the children are learning a lot from their kind of entertainment. That is why in whatever games or whatever movies that are being produced for children, the good have to be, I mean, what the good has to always triumph over the evil. I mean, you can also take a look at, the big fat liar, right? What do the children learn in the end? The children learn it's not good to tell lies, it's not good to steal, right? So basically, these movies are very important for the kids and realize that kids that are being exposed to this kind of movies basically have a different kind of character compared to the kind of children that have actually been watching, the kind of rated movies right from when they're young. So there is a need to emphasize, the good over evil. So I'll rest my case by saying that we do not actually regret, but we prefer that we maintain the status quo. And unless team proposition actually proves to us that there is a very big danger with the current status quo, that there is a danger with this narrative of the good triumphing over evil in children's entertainment, then there is no reason for this debate. Thank you, Pano. I rest my case. Okay, I'm back with for my 1 minute. Yes, so as I was saying, right? So the emphasis of this overwhelming narrative, I'll just summarize the main point is just that it's going to reinforce positive values and it will provide a hopeful narrative, right? And promoting moral lessons and a sense of justice, positive values to the children. I look at a world whereby if we keep on reinforcing this, we're going to have kids that actually have very good values, kids that believe in forgiveness, kids that believe in justice, kids that believe that there is a better life than the evil life. So that is why there is a need to emphasize this kind of thing. So that is basically it. And the other team should come and show that their narrative, I mean, that this overwhelming narrative is actually, okay, yes, they should tell us why it should not be overwhelming, and they should tell us if they believe that this is not good, then what do they have to put in place for the children's entertainment that they think is actually better and will be, good for the children. I think that is all.
Okay, so guys, am I audible? Okay, I guess I'm starting in 3, 2, 1, go. So I think, Chair, I think the problem here is we accept and we accept and we acknowledge that there are benefits that come with whatever opposition is giving us. I have something we already concede to in the round. I think the bigger question would be on why you'd want to have that narrative overwhelming. So that's something you need to justify, not just why the narrative exists or why or a world where you can regulate that narrative, but a world where that narrative is overwhelming. I think one thing we should understand that I think most sites neglect thus far in the round is how most of these societies work and how they're like structured. I think there is not enough to like tackle why most of these structures look that way, but let alone I think there is not much to explain why things would like look better if societies did something different with probably how they structure their foreign policy, etc. etc. I think then the bulk of the case from Gal then has to be on whether most of these societies do consent to probably that kind of thing. I think the biggest problem here is that societies are not like well structured to solve problems and most of those other things. I think one thing you need to understand is that societies are vast and like they are very complex. I think you do not necessarily solve the problem, and I think the fact that you don't solve the problem makes it worse because that problem is something that is supposed to be beneficial not just to one party, but I think to all like parties that are involved. I think one particular thing that you should understand is why people don't normally do most of those things is that they don't do it out of goodwill. They do it because they want to maximize profits. So the general aspect is you want to have good triumph over evil because everybody wants bad, problematic issues to be solved. But I think the problem that becomes is the concept of writers. You give writers able to be able to manipulate what advocacy looks like. Why is that true? I think when you're able to manipulate what probably good looks like, if Batman is a bad person, or if Batman is good for having a no-kill code, or if Superman is okay for not trying to kill people, it's about the narrative and how it overrides it. I think one thing you should probably understand, I'll give you very many live examples. For people who have watched movies like Infinity War, you'll find that people like Thanos have always had right ideologies on probably the fact that the planets be dying because of finite resources. and that his goal was to reduce half of the population, and that for some reason, according to script writers, he was wrong. But if you look at how climate advocacy and how it works, he's right. So I think the concept is on who then decides what advocacy is. I think it becomes bad because most script writers are not generally looking at things like inclusivity of like minority views, or if like minority people are like right or wrong, or if those views are probably mainstream or not mainstream. I think what they care about is the fact that these narratives are able to get them lots of money, and they're able to pay so many bills to like very many people, like in very many different places. I think what you do then is that you hinder what you call like societal interaction on a very big level. It means that you're not able to have societies interact in the vast majority of instances properly because of the narratives that you strive for around them. It means that even when people want to explore different narratives, they can't do that because in of itself individuals don't have narratives that are most importantly going to be able to do that. I think the burden here is not necessarily for you to justify why those societies like are bad, why they don't exist. I think the burden is for you to explain why you having a narrative that probably overpowers all other narratives becomes bad. Because when you have an overwhelming narrative, it means that that narrative is the absolute narrative one way or another. There is no other narrative that can probably have any level of truism to it. I think the problem there becomes that because you don't have a narrative that is probably counteracting the other narrative, it's bad to check which narrative is good and which is bad. Because two things we can consider in this debate is that like morality is subjective, but I think society's view on very many issues is also largely subjective. So it means that society's view can change just generally just generally on the nuance of discourse people can generally have on issues. That's why some people can turn, for example, like pro-democrat and then become pro-republican because of some sort of revelation that they find on very many issues. That's generally true because individuals are most likely going to be able to change themselves to the view that they want. I think I'll first take a PO if there is any. 3, 2.
Yes. So, Siwo, how does your world look like with a balance that you preach? How does it look like?
I don't think I have a very big burden to really go into the details, but it's not a policy motion. It's just simply how I can advocate it. But I think my characterization was very clear. I think that's why OO is not really asking for points of information. But just for clarity, I think the biggest concept here is that world in of itself looks like you having a balance of like advocacy. It means that you have a regulated number of like views that are not overwhelmed. It means some of the movies are free to have narratives that good beats evil, and some others can have a narrative where probably the bad person is probably overwhelming. That's also very helpful because you can bite the bullet and say that that's also good. Reason being is that people can understand that sometimes evil can be able to overwhelm you because people are of the good that whenever they have morally pure principles, they're able to thrive. But most of these individuals don't. That's why most of them end up unemployed even when they refuse to like offer sex to like nasty bosses that want to sexually exploit them to give them jobs. It's because they believe that society is going to stand up for good people. That's one of the things that have been created by these overwhelming narratives. I think Raf is unmuted. Do you have a POI?
If I'm audible, kindly show us like the distinction because it is a regret motion. Do the comparative analysis and let's move on.
No. That's the thing. Is that my counterfactual is not supposed to be about me taking one because the world is not about choosing. The debate is very simple. Do you regret the existence of an overwhelming narrative, not the existence of the narrative itself, the overwhelming narrative, an overpowering narrative? That's your debate. If that's going to be your debate from that end, then you're going to lose because you need to talk about why most of these narratives are overpowering. I think the motion was more clear than it already was. I think then you most likely don't get the kind of benefit that you most likely get from their side. Because I think there is a very big grant from the other end on how you generally don't change most of the issues. I think I've already given the impacts on so many levels why you don't really get redress and how you get very many people to weaponize that media to serve their exclusive needs. That in of itself is bad because the comparative on our end is at least people have leeway to be able to have a feel of both worlds. They have leeway to understand that it's okay for that when a bad person beats you, it's possible and you're not untouchable just because you have good moral ethics. I think it does two things. It encourages people to skill themselves to be prepared for the worst to come. to come from the very immoral people that come out of society and expect the worst out of them because they actually are bad people. So it means that they are not just generally prey to people who are narcissistic and exploitative, but it creates a better society. Sure.
Okay, am I audible now? Okay, Chair. So I start my speech in 3, 2. Wait. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. This House regrets the overwhelming narrative of good triumphing over evil in children's entertainment, their chair and panel. Okay? So what does team proposition present to us? Team proposition wants us to show them why this narrative is overwhelming. Why is it overwhelming? That's what the former speaker wants to know. Why is it overwhelming? Well, we on one side do not want to have an overwhelming narrative of evil triumphing over what? Over good. But anyway, if you want a society whereby evil and good are actually the same page, or actually equal, you can create that society and you see how actually it works out. It actually works out, but for each and everyone of us, their chair panel. It talks about society not being able to agree with the current narrative that good is triumphing over evil. He wants a society whereby evil and good are on the same page. Do you understand the people we're dealing with? We're dealing with infants, dear Chi and Pano. We are dealing with young children, dear Chi and Pano. We look at movies like Baby's Day Out. Actually, imagine if that child in Baby's Day Out was actually captured by those bad people and actually taken. Do you really think a child who watches that wouldn't be traumatized? That, you know what, anytime I step out of the house, they're going to actually capture me? Don't you think that's going to cause trauma to our children? They're dealing with infants, dear Chair and Pano. I don't understand what team proposition comes to tell us here, dear Chair and Pano. But what we team government, what team we opposition want in this particular one, dear Chair and Pano, is them to understand that this narrative has actually done more harm than dear Chair and Pano. Because we have it, if we actually had evil triumphing over what? Over good, would actually have a negative effect on the vast majority, dear Chair and Pano. Look at a society whereby our are raised in the right way, dear Chair and Pano. Because the Bible even tells us that the Bible tells us that train up a child in a way that he should grow. You understand, dear Chair and Pano? So if we are going to let children watch movies whereby evil is triumphing over good, they are going to actually end up being the evil kind of children that we don't want, dear Chair and Pano. We want our children to grow up to be the good children in society, dear Chair and Pano, and not actually the bad children, dear Chair and Pano, because what we want is our children to actually grow up and take up good position in future, dear Chair and Pano, and not actually become the evil people that they actually watch on television, dear Chair and Pano. You may actually let kids watch a movie whereby evil is triumphing over good, and they're actually going to become thieves in and of themselves. They're going to become actually drug dealers, dear Chair and Pano. We do not want that kind of society, dear Chair and Pano. What we want for ourselves is one thing and only one thing. We want our children to grow up knowing that actually they have to move. Because children's movies often portray the triumph of good over evil to instill positive values and promote a reassuring narrative for young audiences, dear Chair and Pano. We want our children to grow up in the right path, dear Chair and Pano, and not take the wrong road, dear Chair and Pano. What promotion gives us in their opening speech is not what we want to, dear Chair and Pano. They fail to make their particular burden in this debate. Their burden is to show us if they put evil in a place of good, what is going to actually happen to the people? What is going to actually happen to our children, to our infants, dear Chair and Pano? They do not show us that, dear Chair and Pano. They actually only come in and tell us that, you know what, you want equality, you want a society whereby evil and good are on the same page, dear Chair and Pano. That's one thing we can't go with, because actually I'm not going to balance this, dear Chair and Pano. These young children cannot balance. They can't actually have evil and good being on the same page, dear Chair and Pano. They will have conflicting layers, dear Chair and Pano. And some of them will actually take the wrong turn, dear Chair and Pano. We want them to take the right turn, dear Chair and Pano. We want them to become good citizens, dear Chair and Pano, and follow the right route, dear Chair and Pano. But now, what proposition gives us is not what we want, dear Chair and Pano. We want our children to be the good children, dear Chair and Pano. I'll repeat that. In tonight's resolution, we believe that our team has actually won this. We actually believe that proposition opposition bench has won this particular round, dear champion, because we are going to have the opposition coming in to tell us that they want a society whereby evil and good are on the same page. We cannot have the same thing, dear champion. We actually, if we're going to have evil triumphing over good, let it triumph over good, and we'll see which society we will have. We shall see which world they propose to have their champion, if it's good for our children. But in our world whereby good is triumphing, yes, they don't want it to triumph, but we want it to triumph overwhelmingly. Okay, don't want us to address why it is overwhelming, because there is no, you cannot let it overwhelm, because a society we actually only want good people. Is there a society that actually wants bad people? And anyway, we understand that they maybe want movies whereby good and bad are on the same level, so you can entertain the children. Well, entertainment is a good thing, their champion. We actually constitute that. I don't want entertainment for their children, but we also want them to go the right way, their champion. We want them to grow up to be the right people, their champion. And not just for entertainment, their champion. We also want them to believe that, you know what, doing good is the right thing and not doing bad, their champion. So what team proposition gives us today is not what we're taking their champion. I want you to come, I want you to actually sit on our bench and feel the pressure we are on their champion. We're on this pressure by God to show them that, you know what, their champion, we're actually taking this particular round, their champion, because we believe that we are going to show them what is right, their champion. It's right to show the children that something is good and not actually bad, dear champion. It's right to show the children that, you know what, you're not actually supposed to be a bad kind. You're supposed to be the good kind, dear champion. I don't know how they are feeling warm in their seats and telling us that, you know what, we want a society that's actually equal for the both of us. We do not want a society that's equal for the both of us, dear champion. We want a society that's going to make our children believe that, you know what, doing good is the right way to go. Because when you do bad, this and this will happen to you. You may actually go to jail on the other hand. You may actually end up dying on the other hand, just because you're doing bad, dear champion. So if these people are having a problem with this narrative of me, let them actually give us a situation whereby they have their own overwhelming notion, dear champion, and see how it works out for the both of us, dear champion. Because we understand that we are actually going to win this particular round of the debate, because we have shown you that you failed to meet the burden of this debate, their proposition, and the opposition bench are actually going to take this particular round, because we know we have met the burden of this debate. We want us to show you why the overwhelming nation is actually a good thing. Well, we are not regretting it, dear champion. We actually believe it's a good thing. So if team government comes and they tell us that they are regretting, I don't know why they have to regret it, because it has done more harm than good, dear champion. We're having our children grow up in the right way, dear champion, because we're seeing that we're having them taking up the right jobs, taking up the right path, yet, and so we do not regret. Well, if they regret, they should tell us why they actually regret it, and which negative effect it has had on the vast majority of the Jan. We may understand that maybe yes, they want entertainment, but entertainment is one thing on the other in their case, dear Jan. We actually want our children to go in the right way, dear Jan. If you actually understand, you actually calm down and actually give it to us even before we go in for the second round of this debate. But I'll actually rest my case, Pano, and Chair Pano, and say I'm proud to oppose. Thank you so much.
All right, am I audible? Okay. Sorry, someone is unmuted. I think Ralph.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just give me some moments. Yeah. Yeah, someone is unmuted and it's giving a kind of feedback that is distracting. I think Ralph or so. Okay, thank you. The person is muted now. POI is exclusively in the chat space. I am going to be timing myself externally so I know my timing. Please, don't unmute for any reason. I am going to be taking some POIs. Just type in the chat space and I'll take you when I can. Cool. So assuming I am still audible, I am going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, there have been some problems with the opening half, and that is the reason why opening half is not going to win this debate. And if closing opposition should also toe their line, closing opposition will most likely not also come second to us. But let's talk about the problem with the opening half. The problem with the opening half is that the opening half totally lacked mechanisms to their analysis. So even if OG tells you that they want people to be able to take control of their life and to be able to self-actualize, how exactly does regretting this narrative necessarily takes you there? We don't really get any counterfactual. We don't really get any mechanisms from opening governments. From opening opposition, they tell you that children are impressionable. So they want to stop children from doing bad. They really don't tell us how not regretting this motion will, at the end of the day, stop individuals from society from being bad, considering the fact that this is a regret motion that is always argued about what is existing right now or things that has existed before. It means that it is safe for us to assume that this narrative is one that has existed before, even if it is not existing now. But even at that, crimes are still existing, and we still have people who are doing things that are morally bad or things that we consider to be bad within society. That necessarily shows you that opening opposition's world is a failed world, essentially. And that leads to the first extension that you will get from my case today. And that extension is under what exactly are the exclusive harm of this narrative that we necessarily think should be a reason why it should be regretted. The major exclusive harm of this narrative is it has not stopped bad from existing. The reason why films or children entertainment are always portrayed this way is because why children entertainment are always portrayed this way is because as a tool of indoctrination, which children entertainment are, and because children spend a lot of time with their entertainment mechanism within society, they use this as a tool to indoctrinate them, to show them necessarily why it is good to be good and why it is bad to be bad, essentially. But we think that this narrative in itself has failed and that we continually fail because bad still exists within society, essentially. We think that to the extent to which this narrative has not achieved its purpose within society, we are safe to say we want to regret it, essentially. Why exactly do we think that this narrative has not achieved its purpose within society? Because society's structure is programmed to immediately reward good, but take a lot of time to reward bad or to punish bad in itself. For example, look at the number of times it takes the criminal justice system to be able to process someone that is bad. Look at the amount of evidences and the amount of time you have to spend to convince a judge as a female that you were probably sexually molested, or trigger warning, you were probably raped, as opposed to having to convince a group of people within society that you probably won a record like Guinness Book record, or you probably were the best graduating student in your class. Look at the time, look at the effort, and look at the energy it takes to get a reward of good as opposed to punishment of bad. That is to always show you, essentially, that at the end of the day, there will always be a situation where good never triumphs above bad, and where people will always get away with badness, because it is very easy, for example, a rapist to get away. It is very easy, for example, someone who is a politician that stole all the country money to easily get away, because they will give you a lot of policies and a lot of laws, a lot of hurdles you have to jump over before you can be able to prove that particular crime, to the extent where people will say, oh, this is a bad thing this person has done, and then want to put that person under the shackles of the law. It necessarily just shows you the amount of way people can get away with bad. But secondly, the reality is that good actually doesn't triumph over evil. I just talked about how corrupt individuals are able to get away with, criminal activities, how corrupt politicians, how the CGS system has to spend a lot of time to apprehend people or to catch bad guys. Like, you can see the amount of money that most countries spend with the policing system, that most countries spend with court system and prison system to be able to accommodate people who are bad, or to be able to locate, in fact, bad people in the first place. This necessarily shows you that at the end of the day, it is very easy to go to another country where you cannot be extradited, or to go to another situation where you can find a loophole within the law and decide to cover yourself up with it. That necessarily means that even in the few times where good triumph over evil, it doesn't happen as it is depicted in this children film. That also shows you that this children entertainment has failed. Why is that so? Most times when you watch where good triumph over evils in children film, it is always about, oh, your stepmother was bad to you, then all of a sudden you found a prince who came to sweep you up your feet. or you were coming from a poor background and all of a sudden you married a rich man and you are good to go, or you found a glass slipper that was your size and you are good to go. The problem with that is, in reality, which this debate should really be about, if you really want good to win about evil, it comes with lobbying, it comes with protest. Sometimes it leads to outright war before you can be able to declare good a winner over evil. It means that there is a force that needs at which it occurs in the first place, that it becomes very difficult to be able, for which you really need to overcome evil in the first will be able to overcome evil in the first place. It means your children grow into the world where they don't understand lobbying system, where they don't understand politicking, where they don't understand situations where you necessarily have to do some particular extreme measures like fight wars or have to trade off some particular benefits before you'll be able to gain any type of good overcoming evil. See the sacrifices people make to apprehend criminals that they were victims to, or to apprehend criminals who harmed them in one way or another. That is something that children are not exposed to, and we think that this narrative is one that has made that possible, and it has failed essentially. What is the counterfactual, which is something that makes us even win above our opening? The counterfactual in today's debate is films should be made that shows the true depiction of how society is, and show that, one, in the first place, you necessarily don't always win above bad. There are times where people get away with bad things because of the politicking system that exists in society, because of the structure of the CGS system, and because of the structure of society in itself. But secondly, we also think that films should be depicted just the way it is, to show that even in the few times where you get good wins above bad, it comes with a lot of trade-off and with a lot of effort. We already have these things being depicted in adult films. We think that there are ways these things can be depicted to children, and children can necessarily understand it. To understand that there are times where you naturally have to use force, or you have to use violence to be able to get, every good to win war. What is the exclusive impact in our own world? We think that the exclusive impact in our own world is where the narrative doesn't exist, means that children becomes less gullible. They now have the ability to interrogate society and their environment objectively. It means they can now be able to call for accountability and not be passive or lackadaisical or anti-empathetic to what political happenings in their society. It means they now be able to pay attention to happenings around them and to the individual activities of people around them, and be able to call out evil, to be able to call out bad. They pay more attention to it. But also it desensitizes the bad, which is directly interrogated with oh. It is in our own world we show you. Sorry, let me just round up my speech. Thank you. It is in our own world we show you exactly how bad exact is one, because children are not indoctrinated to not just go scot-free, but how to survive even in a bad world. You get more from my partner. Thank you.
Please, am I audible? Kindly confirm. All right, sure. Thank you very much. Shout outs to Esther Olamide. So starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I think Esther has done a good job by tackling with the opening half. My partner will show the distinction between us and them. But most of my cases in and of itself is one that is going to have integrated rebuttals. That will counter one, our closing, and that of our opening, and everybody any other person in the debate as well. A couple of observations from opening government, because they placed a much bigger burden on us, on which I'm actually going to solve. They around cases say, there's the rise of this overwhelming narrative in and of itself is one that has created an assumption that everybody in and of itself is one that is supposed to be good in and of itself, which one that takes away things like self-actualization, and one leads to things like the extension of the ideals of individuals or society, not the ideals and morals of of children in and of itself. Understand this. Today's debate in and of itself is one that should be judged on retrospective value. It is a regret motion. Things like it will do this, it is going to lead to this, shouldn't be considered in today's debates. Couple of them have actually happened in the debate already. punish them for it. But secondly, understand that the most important stakeholders or actors in today's debate are children. Understand that children in and of itself are extensions of the morals and behaviors of children in and of itself are extension of things like parenting, coaching, and societal coaching in and of itself, and their environmental significance that it has on them. Because OG tried to lie and say that, oh, it takes away the agency in children so that they can be able to make their own self decisions. Children in and of itself, to a very large extent, lack the basic fundamental human agency to distinguish between rationality, like that's the basic fundamental rationality to make their own like agent decisions between and be able to decide between right and good in and of itself in that regard. That then comes in systems like coaching, parenting, to actually guide them through things like morals and shape them based on values and morals of that society or the parent in which they find themselves in. In that regard, things like they become extensions of human idols wouldn't have any relevance in today's because I've already shown that children's fundamentals in themselves are ones that are based on societal coaching and parenting in that regard. Understand that things like before we can actually do that, the bed in the place on that is to show why the overrising narrative in and of itself is one that is particularly good. Our opening failed to do that. We are going to show you. Understand that in the wake of radical trends of evil and bad in movies, in a radically what's the name? In a radical world where it is actually jammed by things like social media, it means that the consumption rate of movies, be it good or evil, is one that is particularly high because of the high level of social media attention and accessibility to things like minors. Understand that in that same instance, there's also a rise in things like evil movies to actually portray to people how they can become evil human beings, or actually what that might actually shape people or children to become evil beings in the society. In that attempt to counter that response by being responsible in terms of parenting and coaching, one, by the society, two, by their parents and other parenting institutions like the state, the government, and whatsoever that exists. That's why states, movie creators, artists are supposed to then take on the mandate to create things like timeless tales to actually counter that radical event or was the inception of evil movies, to actually create a balance in the morals of children in that regard. But why is this particularly true? This is particularly true because, understand it, the extension of society in and of itself is one that is an extension in one children, because the environment when they are actually growing up is one that shapes them. But secondly, it's one that is premised on things like ideals and art. That is the basis of art in and of itself, and that is the basis of these movies. Because society in and of itself is one that shapes art. That is how, because society has its own, because that is where society actually entrenches its continuity in things like art, morals, and principles to actually shape society to become a morally responsible society in terms of things like behavioral activities and those kind of things. Because that's how social morals in and of itself have been transferred to things like other generations in and of itself. Because that transfer, there needs to be a continuous rise to actually counter the evil movies or evil entertainment that exists in that kind of system. But secondly, to actually ensure there's actually the shift in generations, and also ensure shift in the type of good that we actually portray to these individuals from generation to generations, not just movies about the 1990s. That's why we have movies in 2024, 2023 that depict the current morals and standards of society in that regard, which leads to the presence of things like societal norms by what means or possible in that kind of regard. Understand this. That leads to things like a vast majority of educational value in this kind of thing. Because the nature of children's entertainment is one that often employs the narrative of good overcoming evil as a teaching tool. How? By presenting complex moral dilemmas and actually showcasing consequences of both good and evil, and both good and evil choices in and of itself to children, so that they can actually learn important life lessons, life lessons like regarding things like ethics, and become responsible, and also act upon things like the power of their actions should they sway. The nature of the movies in and of themselves are ones that give the good side, actually shows things like the consequences of them actually doing certain actions that are particularly evil, which has a great impact on the society, and also on things like the social impact. Because it therefore leads to them actually exhibiting things like high levels of pro-social behavior, things like empathy and cooperation to actually shape their morals and their upbringing in society. Two levels of argumentations or impact that outweighs how these people are actually that outweighs government budget in that kind of regard, because it is a regret motion. It's supposed to be comparative as possible. One, philosophically, within the it's one that actually created a moral compass. It means that it has given a clear delineation between good and evil, which serves as a fundamental framework for children to actually develop their own morals and actually internalize pro-social values. This has led to the witnessing of good, because of real of things like witnessing good characters and overcome adversity and defeat violence, that to actually foster things like empathy, compassion, and the sense of justice that exists in society. It actually entrenches things like hope and resilience in that kind of regard, and actually leads to them actually entrenching things like their imagination and their critical thinking levels in that kind of system. Pragmatically, we say that it leads to things like social cohesion and empathy between children, because I've already shown you that children are people or agents of correction. That is why they exist things like parenting bodies and societies to shape them, because they lack that rationality to make on their own human agency to make good and distinction between good and bad decisions in that kind of system. It also leads to things like the emotional development and resilience in that kind of system. It therefore shapes their cultural values and lessons, because stories in and of themselves are ones that often embed cultural values and historical lessons within the good versus the evil framework that this entertainment actually portrays. My partner is going to give you an extensive analysis on that kind of regard on why we actually mean today's debate. Proud winning from CEO.
Am I audible? Am I audible? All right. Okay. All right. I don't know how to time on this bot again. I want to be saying my time from okay. So what will I press slash time? Yeah. Second please. Trying to time myself. Okay. Time. Okay. Um, 7 minutes. Okay, now 7 minutes. 15 seconds. So, all right. All right. Am I still audible? Okay. All right. So panel, we think
He's not audible. He's breaking. Esther, if you can prompt him.
Uh, yes, I'm here. I'm trying to reach out to my partner. It should be better now. Ajake, can you try speaking?
sorry. Someone called me. That's why my network was shaky. Am I audible now? Okay, let me restart my time.
All right, am I audible? So I'll begin in three, two, one. So my partner's speech was able to prove two things. One, it was able to prove how efficable the pop culture is in shaping the behaviors of human beings, and how pop culture should actually be balanced in how it shapes these things. But then tailoring it to children called pop culture within this particular regard, we think that she was also able to tell you about how, you know, uh, children are people who are still in their cognitive stage and developing capacity. So it matters the kind of information you pass to them at that particular point in time, because this is the information they necessarily hold dear. And since they are gullible and impeccable beings, we think that we should be mindful of this kind of narrative that should be in a society. Looking at how we engage CO and OO in this debate, right? First on CO, we think CO is usually contradictory in this debate, and I'll point that out. One, CO believe first in the efficacy of pop culture, why it is good and all those particular things. And also they believe that children are not rational enough to decode some of these messages. And that means they depend on their parents to guide them for coaching and all those particular things. This is where the contradiction comes from their side. Because the parents the children are exposed to are are parents of the 21st century, one, who do not have time for their children, as my partner points out, right? Most of them are capitalists who, in an overwhelming capital world, are trying to save ends meet to send their children to school to keep their family running. So they are back in the evening tired, right? There is no time to coach Junior about what moral is or about what good and bad is in society. But then, secondly, these children are facing parents who are overwhelmingly frustrated about the real world, right? So we constantly see, and this is what we constantly see parents passing on aggression to their children, right? And then the children are not used to this bad side of human beings, because the media they are exposed to is a media where the parent is taking the children to the shopping mall, being overwhelmingly nice and all those particular things, and then they are no bad, and then just that, the parents are always very good. And now in the real world, these particular children are exposed to parents who are frustrated with the capitalist structure of things, who are frustrated about how the world looks like, who come back home every morning tired and are shouting on their children and such other things. What's the impact of this? And this is why it is usually contradictory, because in CEO's world, they want to achieve a world where, oh, children are coached properly
Right.
in a way that, calm down, children are coached properly in a world where they just grew up to be good. But in their world, that's where we have more degenerates, right? Because since children are not rational enough, like they claim, right? Two things happen here. It means that it means that these parents are more likely going to instill their frustrated nature on their children, and this is the frustrated coaching that they want on their world, right? But then, secondly, these children are also confused, because what they are seeing in pop culture is good, right? Oh, people are always nice, right? And bad people are always few. Hence, nice people are overwhelmingly more populated than bad people. And then when it comes to the real world, especially meeting their own parents or going to school and being bullied, right? It's a contradiction in this part, right? On their world, they want a world where, oh, pop culture is seen as good, art is seen as good. These children tend not to trust art, or are confused with art, or see art as unserious, right? Because they are in their uh, as they grow, they are in their cognitive capacity. This particular contradiction in messaging is one that is not good for the cognitive capacity of these particular children, right? From OO, they believe that, oh, we want to instill morals. Oh, morals should be good. And the problem with OO is that they lack mechanism to prove how children watching this kind of movies
Takes you.
automatically mean, calm down. Children watching this kind of movies automatically mean, oh, they'll be bad, they'll be good people. Obviously not. This is the thing we are trying to paint on our side. Since these movies are not depicting the real world, right, and they are not depicting the bad side of things, most likely, right, these children will more likely go into the world as sadists, and they'll also be disappointed because what they are expecting, because they are gullible, they are children and they believe anything, right? What they are expecting from your Cinderella movie is that Junior, who is in school, should treat them nicely. Their parents, who is coming back from work, should kiss them goodbye and treat them. Who is breaking? Calm down. Stop. Unmute yourself, please. Should come back and treat them nicely. But that's not the case. It's a world where you're breeding disappointed children, and disappointed children will automatically be depressed and frustrated in the long run. Hence, they might not necessarily imbibe morals at the long run, meaning at best in your own world, you're more likely wrong. What's your POI? All right, moving on. So that's how come opposition team in this debate might not necessarily rank above golf team in this debate, right? Moving on to our OG, right? We think our OG also shares the same disease that's from up, right? From opening half. Because OG believe, oh, children are going to self-actualize, they're going to be better human beings just because they want a balanced messaging from pop culture. They never explain how that necessarily, can work. And this is what we mechanize from our side, and that's how come we're winning the debate, right? My partner told you already that the kind of overwhelming message you show on pop culture, right, it's more likely showing how people get things done easily, right? How things come so easily, and wearing glass slippers and of that things, which is in contrast to the new world. My partner also told you that because of the cognitive capacity of these children, they are gullible, they'll more likely believe it, right? And this is the kind of things they expect moving forward, even when they go in the real world, right? Our world show you that in a balanced world where there's a balanced messaging, right, two things happen. Children learn that violence can also exist in worlds, right? And people can be bad, right? It gives them this shock absorber when they receive that kind of ends in the real world, because they now understand what the world is, right? Their parents, like I told you, their parents, are busy with the capitalist nature of things. And yeah, I still have 15 seconds based on the bots. Did you restart my time when I was breaking at the time, when I restarted my speech? All right.
Yeah, hello. Am I audible? All right. So I'll prefer my POIs in my fourth minute. I won't be timing myself, so tell when my just feel free and then let me know. Okay. So when you have a POI, just unmute within my fifth minute, and then I'll take you. All right. So assuming that I'm still clear, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, we think that it is clear that in the opening half, there are too much motions in the debate that happening in the opening half, because this is a regret motion. It is retrospective. Insofar as it is regret, you have to analyze what it is that you want to bring and how would your world look like, and how it is that there is an unreasonable problem that exists in status quo. We think that from CG is trying to play smart because it's an unreasonable assumption in the debate. The debate is about an overwhelming narrative of good triumphing over evil. It does not mean that existence of evil in the debate is not possible. It means that both circumstances can happen, but regardless, evil will find a way, one way or the other, to triumph. Good will find one way or the other to triumph over evil. Because that is very, very clear. And you can even trace it from the analysis from member of government when she says that, oh, usually you have problem in even proving that there is a bad thing that has happened. It means then that it means a lot of things, but let me analyze to these things. It means that one, society inherently by social morals wants people to be good in themselves. It means then that we place the tendency of whoever the person is that is trying to prove that somebody has done wrong to prove it before everybody to see. Because in the normal sense, society wants people to be good. What does this mean? It means that in all circumstances, we should try and propagate the narrative that people must inherently be good. But most importantly, even when there are instances where there are bad things triumphing, evil would find its way to triumph. Good would find its way to triumph over good, and the system will work regardless. And that is why Rafiu's argumentation on how society drives art is very important. Because see,
Why?
Rafiu, hold on, I'll take you. I told you in the 5 minutes, right? So Rafiu analyzes to in status quo how trends of evil trying to in reality happening, and things like war and narrative that exist through that pop culture that exists. It means then that in normal social real settings, societal structures, societal norms have been swayed away from the normal way that it has to go to a way where society in itself does not want. And that is why society inherently will repair itself through things like children movies that will want to bring back the narrative of good inherently within society. And that's why it is important in today's debate for the judges to run. Nobody can run away from the fact that this within those circumstances where good triumphing over evil, those worlds does not exist. Now, what does this mean? That this circumstances mean to Rafiu in that debate in that particular regard? Cannot understand that because of that existing narrative that people must inherently be good, it means then that it is untrue for Gabriel to assume that all parents are capitalistic and so they are depressed and so inherently they will come back home and be backing on their children. For Christ's sake, parents are inherently good to their people. You can't run away. You have to prove it even more beyond that to assume that somebody who are giving birth to their own kid will, in all majority of instances, be bad to them in that particular regard. That's very, very false. What it then means that because of the social narrative, parents will inherently want their children to know the things that are good, so that they will rationally in their human experiences to choose the good thing over the evil. What does this mean? It means then
Why?
that societal norms are one that are consistently entrenched and triumph over evil in that particular regard. But most importantly, also because of this narrative and parents more likely going to opt for these things because they are going to choose those things for their children. It means then that the movie industry and the art industry will one that gets buy in. At the end of the day, these people do not prove anything better because they say that we should move to a radical comparative world where evil is there and good is there. What that means is that children movies are one that are not going to be prioritized in today's debate. It means then that the movie industry
Why?
will lose capital, and most importantly, lose funds in that particular regard. You don't get anything, buy-ins and anything from these people. We think that the social symmetrical world that these people preach is one that's inherently bad. Why is our world better? When we think that we don't think that there should be any fiat in today's debate that says people will inherently choose bad or good over them, bad over good. We think that in normal social settings, that as Rafiu tells you, people are good would always find its way to triumph over evil. Government is supposed to prove what that narrative, or like at the end of the day, showing that at the end of the day, good will find its way to like triumph over evil, even in the hardest of circumstances. It's in itself bad, and that's the debate. Like no government already analyzed you. We are the only ones that prove to you how those things benefit the children, most importantly, but also it benefit the parents, especially when they give a lot of alternatives for their people, their children and their wards to have access to good social narrative in that particular regard. But most importantly, we also show you how those things benefit and sustains the arts industry because of the buy-ins that and recommendations that parents are going to recommend for their awards in that particular regard. Proud winning from closing opposition.